Welcome, Third Rock listeners, to the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo, Chief Experience Officer for the Brand Storyteller and the Fusion Creative Brands. And each week, I have the privilege of speaking with extraordinary leaders and entrepreneurs who are reshaping the way industries work. These conversations go way beyond the surface to explore the core philosophies, the lessons, and the challenges that define the brands that we admire today. And one of the greatest rewards of this podcast is the opportunity to share the insights of some of the brightest minds in business, people who are passionate. Welcome to the Brand Laboratory. On today's episode, we're sitting down with Kyle Cords, coming from Portugal, no less. He is the founder of Omlist. Am I saying that right? Omlist?
Omlist, yeah.
Omlist, okay. I was using the meditation sound.
Yeah.
I thought, wait, we're going somewhere cool with that. Let's see where that goes. He's got a bunch of other ventures, so we're going to learn about those as well, and we're going to explore his approach to entrepreneurship. Most of the guests that we bring on the show are entrepreneurs. I'm fascinated by people's journeys and their stories, and just Kyle's going to be no exception to that. I want to talk a little bit about, Kyle, if that's cool with you, how you've built your businesses that are appealing to these niche markets that you focus on, and specifically this luxury memoir ghostwriting application that you got going on. So I want to learn a little bit more about that, and then just hear your story, brother. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, why are you in Portugal? You're American by trade, but you're living in Portugal. Tell me a little bit about that. How'd you get over there?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long story, but I guess we have a little bit of time to talk about it. So when COVID happened, my partner Amy and I, we were Hollywood TV writers, and we had been basically just in that soup for nearly a decade. And we were seeing that the industry was heading towards a consolidation in some ways, where there's no way that it can keep expanding at this rate because streaming hasn't figured out how to monetize yet. And so there's only so much venture money that will go into something that's not going to prove value. And so we were like, maybe we should try and focus on developing things where we can be more in charge of our own businesses. And Amy had already been like freelancing on the side to, supplement the Hollywood income. Because the way that Hollywood works is that you work for like a season, which could be anywhere between 3 months to 6 or 9 months. And then you're just off and you don't know if the show's coming back or whatever. It's a very transient lifestyle. And it's also gives you a lot of anxiety because pretty much anytime you ever leave, then you're like, oh shit, am I going to lose a job? And that always seems to happen is like the minute you take a break or a trip somewhere, you lose something. And so
FOMO
a lot of people are,
yeah,
it's honestly, and it like imprisons people in LA, like in a way that I know some people that just don't go to family funerals and like weddings and stuff because they have just so much anxiety about leaving. And we just saw that and we were like, we need to take more control over what we're doing. And at that point, right before COVID, I had started something called the Orphanage Collective, which was a kind of cooperative-based management company that was ran by writers. Because most management companies are ran by MBAs or finance bros or like different kinds of people who create themselves as the middleman between studios and the creatives. But most writers get work from other writers. So I was like, why don't we just cut that out and then just distribute our resources among each other? And so I was already like starting that because it felt like such a I don't know how it feels when you're starting something, but it always feels like dangerous in a legal way. But I think that this could really do something. And I don't know why people aren't doing this. And so we had started that company, and that's like a whole nother journey. But we essentially were in LA starting these various companies. Amy was getting a ton of work in as a freelance writer, and everybody was on like stimulus checks and unemployment. And so Amy was like, all of these Airbnbs are empty. And this was like the first couple months into the pandemic. And it was like, why don't we just like quarantine together? And then we can just go rent out these crazy places that would be like $20,000 a month. And we could get it for $5,000 because they just want to pay their mortgage or get something so they're not losing. And I was like, that's a great idea. So a lot of us just gave up our apartments and then we just went and traveled America for a year before Europe or anywhere else opened up. So we were in Colorado and Palm Springs. And during that time, it was always like, how do we just grow this stuff more? And Amy was like, it was funny because we were building like a podcast company because we were like trying to have our friends. It was like, oh, we're all stuck inside, but what could we do? It's, oh, we could do audio. And so we had to have a scripted audio company called Kingdom of Pavement. And then I was running Orphanage. And even during that time, some people were getting work through Orphanage, but I realized that something else needed to supplement into that. And we created this thing called Kingdom of Ink, which was like the sister company to it, where it revolved around bringing together different freelance writers, because most people who are freelance writers are in Dayton, Ohio, or random places, and they don't have a community where they can share and foster and do all that stuff. And we went through a lot of different iterations with our companies, and a lot of those companies aren't around anymore. And I think it was just like a lot of learning lessons and us just like running into the world and being like, we just need to figure this out. But the one thing that was really key was Amy had been doing memoir ghostwriting for people. And for any of the clients that weren't able to afford her, we basically gave them other people that could help them. And we helped create different packages or to how to scale that. Or we were also really big in the Web3 writing scene. And there was stuff that was falling off of that. So we had a huge inflow of clients that just Amy couldn't serve entirely. And so I created this other agency to basically absorb that, the stuff that was falling off of her plate. That was another thing that we really learned how to optimize and grow. And then it was just getting really complicated for a lot of different reasons.
So let me stop you there, because there's a lot of things I need to unpack. So you have 3 different brands right now. Is that what I understand?
That at that time we had the Orphanage Collective, which was a creative management company in Hollywood. Then we spun that off and made a duplicate version of that for freelance writing called Kingdom of Ink. And we also had a podcast company called Kingdom of Pavement. And then Amy also had her memoir ghostwriting on top of all that. And we were just trying to figure out how to optimize resources. But how we got into traveling was essentially we wanted to keep figuring out how to do remote work and how to make writing valuable. And I think that was like our main goal in Hollywood, is like, how do we find places that value writing? And that was like our pursuit since then. And now like Kingdom of Pavement, Kingdom of Ink, Orphanage, we shut those down due to like just the difficulty of the business model and what we set up. And I think we assumed that people would be like their ideal selves, but didn't anticipate what they would be at their worst self. And I think that the organization couldn't handle when somebody didn't really show up or wasn't giving back, or like there was like the company required like perfect community, but you need a company that can withstand imperfect community. And I think that was like the hard lesson there. So then when all that shut down, I just helped Amy with operations for memoir ghostwriting. And so we have clients, like she's in Vienna right now with a client while I'm here just doing other work. And I've just been trying to help with operations and streamlining things and optimizing SEO. And so I got really into cold email, absorbing leads, and how to just grow and get more clients and make things as easy as possible with her process to have us do as many books as we could.
All right, so let me back up again. So you just have memoir ghostwriting right now as we stand. That's the business you're operating and running.
I also have Omlist, which is the movie recommendation app. So I admit we
can't sit
fast.
still. You just can't sit still, can you? Do you worry that? Yeah. Do you worry that as an entrepreneur? Because trust me, we've all been here. I've been running my entrepreneurial life since 2006 full time. I used to work in the corporate world, so I get it. You're always trying to experiment and find what works. Do you find, though, in the process of constantly recreating yourself in a way that you maybe struggle with some burnout around it, or does that inspire you to, okay, this didn't work out, I got to find this? Do you ever lose hope, I guess is where I'm going with that question?
That's a great question. I think that we always chased what we thought was most interesting. And we didn't shy away from like difficult concepts. Obviously, we worked in Hollywood where everybody said it's impossible to make it. And it's pretty impossible. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would say that to win the lottery, you have to buy lottery tickets. And I think working in Hollywood is like buying lottery tickets with your life, hoping it's going to feed your family. And that's not to say that there's not winners. It mainly takes out people. But I think with burnout, also like I was in my 20s at that time, I'm now in my 30s. And I had been like wanting to do something. And when you're in Hollywood, it's like you have this pent up energy because you're just like, oh man, I just need to get this out here. I have this idea for this, or I just want to do this. And you're waiting for gatekeepers to give you the green light. And I felt like I just had a lot that I wanted to do. And I still have a lot that I want to do. But I think I'm much more, I guess, like utilitarian and focused now, because I realized having a bunch of different domains, having a bunch of different emails, having a bunch of different companies just created this like crazy bloat where it was like really hard to control everything.
Yeah.
And I found myself, getting pretty burnt out with those. But I think there's always like a moment. I'm not sure if you've closed a business before that you started, but I feel like there's just that weird moment. It's almost like a calm where you just realize it's over. I feel like there's life cycles of things, and there's times when you push through when something's wrong, but then there's also a moment that allows you to get off and it makes the most sense, whether you're going to sell the company or you're going to spin it off into something else, or just take a few parts out of it and then close the greater whole. I think like those moments.
The trick with that, if I may, for a second, because there's a strategy to that. And everybody has a different purview on this, right? But what is that fine line between shutting the business down and pushing further into it? Because I had experience with one business and I shut it down for a variety of reasons, but I did pivot and launch it again anew. But by and large, the book of business that it held, I was in a partnership with somebody else, and that just partnership went sour. And so we had to close down one of those businesses. But I remember thinking up and like literally up to the point as I'm walking down to the lawyer's office thinking, is there a way I can actually still make this work? Is there some way I can tweak this, modify this? What did I do wrong? All these questions that ruminate through your mind. When you shut down these other businesses and launch something else, were you facing those same sort of conversations with your head?
Yeah, I think there was stuff that we took out of the businesses totally. And I think like the writer agency, like Hollywood agency thing that we were trying to create were like of a similar concept of, can I make a cooperative, almost like socialist company that benefits from capitalism? Like I was like, can I create this and can I make it work? And I realized that I couldn't really. And I think a lot of it came down to human error and also my human error. And I think if I had to, on my Substack, I've been doing kind of a series of lessons I've learned from my previous companies. And I'm going to put out the Kingdom of Ink one tomorrow. But so I've been just thinking a lot about them. But I think if I were to have to restart those companies, I definitely would have done a lot of things differently. But I think it potentially would have still.
Such as, I'm not going to let you off the hook with that. What would you have changed? What were the biggest, if you could, what were the biggest lessons you learned in the failures of those operations from where you're looking at it now?
I think accountability, I think, is really high. And I think how do you measure someone's effort, right? And when you're in a structure where you have mutual aid, you have a certain percentage going that's getting redistributed to the group, like how do you determine that what the value is that they're bringing in is equal to what they're taking out? And so,
I need to pause you there for a second. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but I got to make sure I understand. So this business, because I heard you say socialist, this business was like an equal share model, like a revenue sharing model for all of the people that were co-owners, if you will, and everybody was supposed to be contributing, and thus everyone was supposed to be receiving dividends from those contributions. But you're saying the accountability, the oversight of those contributions was human error, like your inability to manage that effectively. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, no, you totally broke that down. And so I think if I had to restart those companies, I think accountability is everything. So there would have to be some like level of, I think the thing with companies is that they're not gifts to your previous selves. I think sometimes I was building things because I wanted to make the world that was hard for me easier. But I realized that that's not the case with people, is that they can't value what you've struggled to build. So you have to figure out how to create a system in which they feel value in earning what they're getting. Otherwise, they feel like they're getting away with something. And so it's like a very fine line between, if the deal's too good, then people like, and they inherently unconsciously know it, and you don't create systems in which they feel that they've earned it, and there's been like this mutual thing set up, then it can breed different outcomes. But if somebody's taking from the cookie jar for too long and you let them, then you say, hey, stop taking from the cookie jar, and it's gone on long enough. Then they feel righteous. Who are you to say I can't have this? This is the way that it's gone. This is the way that it should be. And so you can't let bad behavior foster. And when I had the 20 people that were in that group, it was just too much for me to psychologically handle and like audit everybody's situation. And so I would have had to create like a platform where people submit what meetings they went on, like all the things, and for us to process checks. Like it was absorbing and becoming this like bigger thing, but it just had problems. But I think anybody that's wanting to do that, or just start like a cooperative market, like with local farmers, I think a lot of that requires contracts at the beginning, mutual agreements with each other, that I'll watch the shop on Mondays, you watch the shop on Tuesdays, do all this stuff. We'll clean it all on Sunday. And so it requires this community effort, like living in a house with people. It requires like a lot of infrastructure to maintain civility.
All right, so I want to go back to that for a second. So you have this organization that is a cooperative, you call it a socialist something or other. Is there a larger paradigm, metaphorical discussion to have around that as it relates to just business, scaling a business, and sort of the idea of a single source leader and other people working for them versus this sort of larger model of a cooperative business running play? And when you look at this sort of thing on like a larger scale right now, do you see any metaphors in terms of running a business versus running a country versus running a farmer cooperative? And if so, like the lesson that you learned in that, from what I heard you say, is that managing these people who felt entitled after having a standard for so long, did you not think maybe we need to come together? And again, this is not a judgment question. It's just sort of me trying to understand the process. Did you not think at this point, hey, maybe we need to bring these 20 cooperatives together and say, okay, look, here's the fallacies that we're seeing right now. How would you as a cooperative fix this? Did that ever happen in that conversation with those people?
Yeah, we would have a monthly like meeting that was just about businesses and propose like things, because we had the budget. People were getting money, and money was, because like with management companies, you give 10% or whatever to your manager based on whatever jobs you got. And so I was like, why don't we just have whatever that 10% is go back into us, and we can mutually agree by like vote what we wanted to invest in, whether it was like a subscription for the group, whether we all had the same Netflix account, or whatever it was, we could allocate resources. And so long as the company was paying for its costs, then like anything that was left over with some buffer room was just redistributed to the group. And I think like having like what you were saying, like bringing it to the group to solve the problem. I think like my constant goal was to get beyond like cohort 0, which is what I called it, which is like the pilot group, because they were supposed to have their own groups and we were supposed to build it that way. And it was just so hard to get beyond that. And I realized that the group wasn't as strong without me, because everybody's main personal connection was me in that group. And I almost needed them to be as connected to each other as they were to me. But when everything is, I'm just the waypoint for each person, and they're not, and it's not like becoming like a grid or a network more, and I'm just like the node of it all, then it was like a lot harder for me to grow beyond that. And there was a lot of other things where it was a new structure in Hollywood, and Hollywood very much wants you to play a part of the game, and people want to be accepted by Hollywood because it's a form of validation, because they want to feel like important. And chances are, if they don't feel important, there's like a lot of things when people are drawn into Hollywood, chances are like it's hard to live in reality. So you create stories. When you don't like what reality's telling you, you make a story. Like traumatic stuff that happens to us, we find a story that makes us like feel better at telling it. And I think a lot of people that can be drawn, not everybody, but a lot of people can be drawn to LA because they have a hard time with value, and they're wanting acceptance from this amorphic blob of an industry. If they're dating a celebrity or whatever, like they're trying to get trophies. And that's what I was saying with a lot, is like there's a lot of writers in Hollywood that want to be a showrunner but not a writer. They want to be a movie star but not an actor. And so it's like people are wanting these job titles but not what went along with that. And so there's a disassociation a little bit that makes it hard to say, this is the balance sheet, this is what's happening, this is hard facts. And because people are trying to like spin narratives around that, and it can be hard to unify that in that idea. And that was, I know it was a lot of word vomit, but
it's an interesting conversation. I don't think it's word vomit at all. I think it's an interesting conversation to have, because when you look at running a business versus, and I went down a rabbit hole with you, sorry, this is my fault, but running a business, and I've been an entrepreneur since 2006. Being a leader is a very lonely position at times, and I think you're starting to find that out, right? Not everybody is, let's just call it what it is. Not everybody is designed to be a leader. There are people that are inherently not capable of running things. And so one of the things that first pops into my mind now is that scaling and efficiency from running a co-op versus running a capitalist environment are completely different. If you look at any socialist government that's ever been on this planet, most of them have failed in a scaling model because they have all sorts of challenges of what you just talked about. Who runs it? How do you balance equity? All those different things. But most importantly, one of the things that first popped into my head was like these decision-making bottlenecks, because I wasn't a co-op, but I had a partner before, and we were 50-50 partners. And then, in fact, I've had two companies. The one of them I sold, and we figured it out, and I'll tell you why we figured it out. But my latest company, which I had to shut down and pivot, we had a decision-making bottleneck on a regular basis. I saw the company going one direction. She saw it going a different direction. I thought my contribution was worth X. She thought her contribution was worth Y. And we constantly kept rubbing up against what type of clients do we want to work with? How do we manage our team? All these different things. And this decision-making bottleneck, because we were 50-50 partners, it just became an obtuse model to follow. And then I look back at my first business that I built, and I scaled that and sold that for multiple six figures. We had a 51-49 partnership where I was the CEO, and while he had equity in the company, ultimately I was able to make the decisions. And so for whatever reason, wrong or indifferent, that company ran very smoothly, because when it came down to a deference in our opinions, ultimately it was a discussion, but I ultimately made the call on it. And so for me, when I look at that model, and I'm going somewhere, sorry, I'm rambling now, but
I like it.
Scaling and efficiency, decision-making bottlenecks, sustainability and growth, conflict. You just talked about equity and efficiency, power and accountability. That was like, for me, that model just is not sustainable. Again, I don't have much experience in that space, but the model itself, when I look at it as a CEO and a businessman, it doesn't have any efficiency of scale. And so now my question to you is, now having seen that, you can disagree with me, by the way, I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just my opinion. Now having seen that and experienced that and taste that, looking back, what would you have changed about that? Would you have gone with that same model, or would you move more toward a real capitalist type of model?
I think it would have had to balance a lot of that. The more that I kept doing, because like Amy and I have been freelancers on Upwork, and we've interacted with these Fiverr and other stuff like that. And the more that I was building the company, I was like, oh man, it's so impersonal. Like the thing as a creative or as a person that's working, as like you said, as a business owner, it can be really lonely. So it's like, how do you find other business owners? You make a podcast.
Exactly. That's exactly what I do.
That's the solution.
That's my secret sauce right there.
Yeah. I think it would have to veer towards capitalism. And when I said the socialist, it was like a socialist capitalist like concept, because I was like, we could leverage all of the perks of capitalism and try to foster something that was just community like oriented. But if I had to redo it, I think it's a platform. And I think like the main thing that I started to see with other things that got it more right with Upwork was that you, Deevo, was like going to be on Upwork, and you would put your face, your thing, and then somebody would be like, hey, I want your help writing blogs for me or something. And then you're like, okay, this is my agreement, this is my hourly rate, or you maybe do a fixed rate for 10 blogs. And then they'll review you at the end. So it's in your best interest, if you want further work on the platform, to play nice and do the best that you can, because it's making you examine, even if you have a bad client, it makes you get better at customer service because you realize how to deal with that. But more often than not, sometimes employers will deal with troublesome freelancers also. And so if you're having a hard time dealing with somebody, the idea that you can review each other and say, yeah, this person was good, and money was exchanged, that's like the best way to build, because then that means that person is fully exposed. They can't hide. If they want to have jobs on this platform, they're going to play nice, and it's going to help people get to their best versions of themselves to interact with other people. And so that's why I realized that like platforms and needing some sort of code-based infrastructure of a platform that people interacted on, whether it's the employer and the freelancer, was what needed to happen. Because it can't be me being like, hey, you're not pulling your weight. I would have to be like, hey, based off of your data sheet of what was contributed this week, you're 50% below what you should be. Yeah. Why is that? How do we help you fix that? I'm not the bad guy. This paper is saying that you didn't show up based off of what you agreed upon. Mm-hmm. And so it's like trying to find, that's why like money works in business so, is because it's either you're making it or you're losing it. And there's not like a whole lot of spins you can put on it. And I think that's what I would do going into those companies again, is it would need a greater infrastructure of data to back up accountability, as opposed to a person's opinion.
Yeah, I like the data report. You can't argue with data, but I wonder if that doesn't turn into some sort of, what's that show on television? I don't know if it still runs. I don't watch much TV. Oh, Survivor, where it turns into the alliances, and then people make up stories, right? You said earlier. So when you're in a survival mode and everybody has equal opportunity to coexist, do alliances start to form and say, right now Kyle's skewing the data, there has to be something wrong with it, he's the only one that's manipulating the data and controlling the data? I don't know. It's like this, it's an interesting conversation. I'd like to switch gears if we have, because
let's do it.
There's a lot of different things I want to ask about. So you're running Ohm, and you have the memoir ghostwriting business right now. Who do they cater to specifically? And if we focus on one or two, or just so we have some understanding, like who is your ideal client for Omlist, and who is your ideal client for the memoir ghostwriting?
Yeah, memoir ghostwriting, that's mainly Amy's whole show. And she is the one that is writing the books, and she's interacting with the clients. And I'm helping with her like organization of social streamlining things, processes. Like I'm just like an operations person for her to help with that.
But hold on. So that business that Amy's running, and then your operations direction, that would be for someone like me. I want to write a book, but I don't really know how to write a book. So I would contract out to you and Amy to say, hey, I have this really cool idea. This is what I want to do. Can you help me with this? And then you guys manage the creative writing of it. And then there's a back and forth between you and I and just figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I work more as like an editor on those books sometimes. And so basically what our clients are very often, we're like a top of service brand. We're like a luxury product. And that's like what we've built the business towards. So we work with a lot of CEOs in the tech space, Olympians. So we work with a lot of kind of notable people that want to tell their stories, because you'll find that we didn't do the books for them, but like a lot of people who say they write their books, the Obamas or whatever, like they have people that are basically doing that draft for them. Or it's, oh, wow, I didn't know this actress could write this book. And it's very likely that she didn't. And so like I'd say 99% certain that she didn't. And even people who do write their books, there's also teams around them. So it's a very interesting process. So we cater, and we do like handful of books a year for a handful of clients, and that's been a very good business for us, and it's fun and interesting. And yeah,
how do you the first thing that jumps to my mind is your chameleon. How do you assume the voice and the persona if you're ghostwriting for somebody? Can you talk about that process a little bit? So if I'm just going to use me as an example, because I've always wanted to write a book, and I don't know that I will or will not, but if I were to come to you and say, hey, this is my idea, this is what I want to build, how would you, what's the process for becoming me when you're writing? How does that persona adaptation occur?
Yeah, so I see this with Amy a lot when she's interacting with her clients, and both of us have experiences in Hollywood. And what they taught us, we went to film school and we were TV writers. And so the main thing you got to do for being a TV writer is mimicking voice. You're having to mimic the voice of a showrunner. So it's whatever show you're on, you're like, I'm writing for this voice so that this person has to do the least amount of rewriting possible. It might not be what you're writing. It's just like, how do I serve you as good as possible? So for 10 years, we just wrote things in other people's voices. So that kind of trained us to be chameleons, which was a very like interesting transition into memoir ghostwriting.
But what's that process though? I'm actually fascinated by that. So you and I are in similar roles in some capacities. I coach my clients and I teach them how to build their business and build their brand. And in order for me to get in bed with that process, I have to go through a very rigid, structural, systemized process where I assume their persona in their business, like what are their big, juicy, audacious goals. So how do you as writers, if I can, how does Amy and how do you assume a personality? Do you have a specific process? So again, if listeners, and most of my listeners are CEOs, want to write a book, I want you to share with them, how can they feel warm and fuzzy that their book is in good hands because they know that you're going to be able to assume their persona. How does that process work?
So Amy does most of this. And so her whole process is that she does either in person or over Zoom interviews. And then they also, it kind of tailors to each client, but essentially it's like a lot of context into this person's life and what they feel like the major touchstones are. And you can get it because we also like transcribe these meetings, and then you can see the voice of somebody. And so we have a lot of context of what this person's talking styles like, or how they want to be presented, or do they really like sports, and so there's sports references. And so we can break down to its parts, like how does this person communicate? Do they communicate more emotionally or logically? How do we dial this. And so we were mimics, because also the thing when you're writing scripts is like when you have characters, you have to speak in the voice of a teenage girl or an 80-year-old man. And I think based off of your capability as a writer, and Amy and I were both the top writers of our respective programs. She went to USC and NYU, and we both won the top awards those years. And I think a lot of it just comes down to listening to people and being like a good mimic. Because even like in conversation, like when you're having it here, like it's all about mirroring. It's about like talking. Am I talking to somebody that wants to talk more about video games, that is like more like intellectual with books? And so like any situation that we're in, to various degrees, on how good you are with people, it relies on how good you are at mirroring them. And like you said, getting into their shoes with what they want. It's like a giant form of empathy, because you could, if you were just taking over a business, you do it very differently than as a coach, where it's saying, I see your problem and these are the things that you worry about the most. And if I were you, I would focus on this. Or maybe the thing that's keeping your business from going to the next level is actually your fear of this, of being on TikTok or whatever. Like it's being like, but I think that'd be really important for you. But there's these other avenues that they feel better for you to fill in that maybe can make up the difference. And so it's guiding. And I think like in the reverse with books, there's just a lot of communication and a lot of things, and the person giving insight on their book. And so it's a pretty organic process. And our goal is to make it feel like, wow, this is like the best version of myself that had years and was like a professional writer wrote this.
Are you allowed to talk about books that you've written for other people, or is that because you're a ghostwriter, that's not something you can chat about?
Yeah, that's not.
But I assume that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever forget to come out of character when you're with each other?
But yeah, we are ourselves with each other all the time, and I think it's just like you are with like your partner or with your friend. Like I don't think you like have to think about what it's like to be in different spaces with different people. Or weirdly, whenever we're in London, like I'm just like starting to have a bit of a London accent, but it's because we're wanting to make the group feel like that we're a part of it. And so I think it comes from a similar place.
You're in a luxury branding concept and a very niche market. And I would imagine writing books and assuming other people's personas that you do, it requires a deep attention to detail. So how do you ensure that on a regular basis, you not only meet and exceed your clients, but you're able to pivot and adapt because I would imagine like I'm fickle about certain things. And so I have an idea about something, but then, oh, squirrel. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, wait, I want to switch that. How do you, as writers that are helping high level CEOs or people that are prolific in what they do, how do you make sure that your standards of excellence are always in par with them?
I think we're always trying to do the highest version of whatever they want. And so if we're dealing with business owners, like often we've read every business book out there that anybody's ever loved, whether it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Good to Great, Essentialism, Mountain, The Untethered Soul. There's The Power of Now, Grit. There's all of these books that anytime a client ever says that this is the type of book I want to write, we read it. And at this point, there's very few books that a client proposes to us that we haven't already read. So we know what their information diet is. And so we can tailor make that, because it's like, if you like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you can't, like, more often than not, you like the beginning of that book where it talks about what does it mean to shed the persona as a person who's an employee to becoming a person that runs a company. And then it gives you just like really simple details of what to focus on. So that means that you like part narrative, part like, things you should check out, like rules, not rules, like tips and tricks. But if you like something like Good to Great, that means you like really information heavy, research backed up points that sort of elaborate your point of view. There's a lot of different things. And if somebody just wants something that's like essentialism, then that means that they want something that maybe isn't as personal, and they want something that just more translates what their coaching practices are and their tenets. And they might have tiny little anecdotes in there, because I feel like we always like to put those in because it humanizes the writer to the reader. But
I'm reading that book right now, Essentialism.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a good book.
How essential are you?
Yeah. As you can see behind me, I'm an avid reader, but that's a kind of a cool perk of what you do, the opportunity to just dive into these. I want to talk about this for a second, because I was having this conversation with my kid the other day on the importance of reading and the importance of just perpetual learning. And you have to do it because it's part of your craft. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how critical is it that we are always focused on continuing our education and, most importantly, reading books because of the value that they bring to us? What do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the idea that school is only for 12 years or whatever, and then it ends, I think is like a myth. The thing that you should actually get from school is a way to learn how to learn. Because like your whole life is going to be some element of learning. Like I've been learning to code for the past 2 years, and I just launched that app Omlist because I was just like wanting to find better movie recommendations faster. And I thought all the other recommendation apps were doing it wrong. And I just had this itch because I love building products. I love building experiences for people. And I think that like learning is so important to that. And I think that learning how to code from scratch or learning from these books, like how to run a business or different things to focus on, or reading the tax code actually is really helpful. Like it's just important to know the structures you're existing in and how other people got to where they are. Because I think also the process of learning or just like specifically reading is you get to be in the headspace of really impressive people that are either dead or alive or just way too busy to interact with. Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, I think is a really good book about how competition's for losers. Just figure out the one area that is not being looked at that you think you can add a unique perspective to. And what is the one thing you believe that feels like an outlier of an idea? And I think all of these things are questions and moments in empathy. But I think like when I'm reading books, I always have a notepad next to me because I'm trying to see it's almost like the process of you reading it, right? It's like you're in a conversation, a one-sided conversation with this person, and it's like affecting you in certain ways. That's why I don't like, a lot of people are like, I can read a book in a day. And I'm like, I like to read a book over the course of a month because I just like really want to sit with it. I just read the Rick Rubin book on art, and I think there's a lot of really interesting sort of little ideas in that. And I think constantly it's about how do I become more of who I am? And chances are a lot of these really impressive people have aspects of the thing that I want to become. Yeah. And so it's like going into the candy store and just picking the candy that you want rather than taking everything.
That learning capacity and the way you read books is really cool. That struck a chord with me because I do the same thing. I have a small notebook that I actually insert as like it acts as my bookmark. But I love that. Yeah. And my wife thinks I'm crazy because I'm reading like 4 or 5 different books simultaneously right now. And it's not because I have attention disorder. It's because different books give me different things. And when I sit down to read, sometimes I want to read about self-help. Sometimes I want to read about fiction. Sometimes I want to read about a biography. Yeah. But in each of those books, what's really cool, I love what you just said. I can read a chapter and then put the book down. And then I'll come back a couple days later and read that chapter again. And it's between the lines, there were so many different things that I didn't even either absorb or I missed or like a different nuance. So yeah. So the idea of reading a book in a day, that's impossible for me, first of all, but just being able to absorb all of that and understand what it looks like and the subtleties and the nuances and reading between the lines. So I love that. In terms of ghostwriters, sorry, I don't want to run out of time because there's a few things that I definitely want to touch with you. Yeah. In terms of ghostwriting, is this sort of this is a standard? Like there's a bunch of people who do this ghostwriting thing?
Yeah, you can like Google ghostwriter or memoir ghostwriters and you'll see the people that come up for it. And it's interesting, like for one of the things I think that's really helped with Amy's business is that like I focused a ton on just her SEO and trying to get her on the first page. So if you put in hire a memoir ghostwriter, Amy's right there. And I still think that's like a really valuable thing. The hardest thing also that we found is
I'm going to test you on really that right now.
Yeah, hire a memoir ghostwriter who comes up for you.
We're going to see how good you are at this.
Let's see.
Where I was going with that question is, what makes what you and Amy do distinguishably different and unique from other ghostwriters?
Yeah, I think that we don't really know the other ghostwriters. We see a bit of their process and we see based off of what their packages are, like how they're operating. So we're always examining the competition. But the major ones that
Amy Suto?
Yeah, that's the thing. So if anybody here wants a book,
5 on my list. So well done.
Wow. So yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's if anybody here wants a book, go to amysuto.com for more information. I think that I don't know. I forgot my question. Or I forgot
the question was, what makes your business? And I know we're talking about memoir ghostwriting, and that's Amy, but you're also operationally keeping her front and center. So you're still part of that brand. So if I was trying to make a choice between the thousands of other people and I Googled it and there's 5 that popped up right away, what makes your business uniquely qualified and different? What makes you stand out is where I'm going with that.
I think that it's so hard to know, like in that thing, the process that we wanted is, if you look at any of those websites, when you go to Amy's, it feels warm. We wanted to create a sense of warmth that like, there's like a certain level of like femininity that you're going to tell your story. Like people that want like female therapists as opposed to male therapists. What kind of energy do you want in telling your story? And so we thought a lot about the branding, the like elements, and like what you want contributing. Because if you go to Ruby Peru or Jenna Glatzer or any of these things, you can see the level of intention in somebody's website that they put into your book. And so I think that like the thing that a lot of our clients say is you have the best website out of everybody. And also I tried working with this company and they were just really not good. We often get a lot of the people that said they couldn't afford us, tried the cheaper option, and then came back. And also we've done a lot of jobs on Upwork, and Amy's the #1 writer on Upwork. And so we have a lot of validation there to show what her capacities are and what this work has contributed. And we've earned quite a bit of money on that platform. And a lot of people come to us when they either don't want to worry about getting a great book or they need help after trying with somebody that didn't handle it properly. But nobody has ever gone to somebody else after they've started with us.
So the personalized approach that you take.
Yeah, we're intentional. We're highly intentional people.
Yeah, so, I love the fact that you read all the stuff that's tied to my avatar. That's a pretty cool process. We haven't talked about Omlist yet, and I know we're running out of time. So tell me a little bit about what is Omlist and what does it do? Why do I use it? Give me a little bit the 411 on that.
Yeah. So I guess I'll ask you a question. When you are trying to figure out what to read or watch, or even watch with your partner, your wife, like what is your process of finding something to read or watch?
I don't really watch TV. If I do watch TV, it's generally going to be something around nature, animals. That's about it. I don't watch sports or anything like that. I rarely go to the movies. So I'm probably not the best person to ask that question. As it pertains to reading, I have a huge network of people like yourself that recommend stuff to me on a regular basis. I belong to a book club. I follow a bunch of people on Instagram that I highly respect, and they're always dropping knowledge on books. So it comes from a variety of sources, and it also really depends upon what I'm looking for. I'm always looking to improve in some way, shape, or form. So is there something that I'm working on right now that I need like right now, I'm part of a blended family in the last 3 years. And so co-parenting someone else's kids has been a massive challenge for me. So I'm reading a lot of books on how can I show up as a co-parent for someone else's kids right now, as an example.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my process.
Yeah. So books is something that Omlist will eventually get to. I just started with movies. I knew a bunch of people in Hollywood that were just like avid cinephiles, and they were always trying to figure out what more to watch. And so I think there's a lot here, but my main secret sauce is that I am using simply comparison algorithms between users to source information. So based off of going through Omlist, you'll like swipe if you like something or dislike something, and then it'll take you to a tournament mode where it says, pick this or that as your favorite. And then it will make a list of your favorite things, your favorite movies. So it'll be like your list of 400 movies that you've seen, and eventually books, like the 400 books you've seen or read that you love, from the one that's won the most to the one you like the least. And it compares that against other users' lists. And then it essentially puts you in like a taste cluster that then gives you essentially book recommendations based off of your taste cluster. So of what you haven't read. And and that's super unique than the other areas of huge data that are trying to leverage keywords, trying to leverage what you've searched, like whatever it is, Netflix, how long you looked at an image. Like there's all of this stuff that is like just essentially they think with enough compute, they will duplicate you and be able to have a mirror version of you curating to yourself. I think that there's something really unique about humans and how we relate to one another. And I have a lot of theories about how we group socially and like what our different personality types are. And I was just like, maybe there's something intangible about humans liking what other humans like. And so who in the world has the most similar book taste to you? Technically, in the largest form of Omlist, you'd be able to get the information from that and be able to have it. Like, what would be a really unique data source that kind of builds us based off of our unique qualities that might not be readily available? Like in your book group, I wonder if there's anybody that you feel like has your exact taste. Because my theory is that there isn't. It's I like this book. This person really liked this book. I didn't really like this book. And I think a lot of life, and if you look at any rating system, whether it's like Google Maps, it's 400 people say this is a 4 out of 5 stars, is essentially saying there's an average. 400 people, but you don't know what those different people like. Maybe they all hate Chinese food and you love Chinese food. And so it's like all of this stuff is just highly depersonalized. And it's also clustered around a centralized average, whereas mine kind of breaks that centrality and groups it around clusters of similarity. And
is that how Spotify creates favorite lists as well, based upon users and music that you like? Are you familiar with the Spotify business model?
They've been changing a lot over time. And so the thing with Spotify is it's actually, a lot of people really Discover Weekly. That's been like one of their favorite things, but people say it's been varying because I know they've been experimenting a lot with AI to try to have AI be their feedback loop, but a lot of people say it's gotten worse. But originally what Discover Weekly was, when I was hearing the most positivity about it, is that based off of your listening habits, you were listening to your top 2 favorite musicians. And what it did was, of all the other people who had those top 2 musicians being played the same way you were, or had that same like priority, they gave you the third thing that you weren't listening to. So that's why it felt like magic in some ways. It's, oh, okay, like it's giving me a listen. I'm like, I like this. This is cool, because it was giving you a diverse set of people that liked the top things you liked and gave you the third thing you didn't know.
So my takeaway for Omlist is it's like a personalized biometric based upon your preferences, but also it's not a friends group, but it's just like the things that, not who you follow, but your biometrics and based upon your own feedback loop.
Yeah. And so everybody that downloads, like whoever downloads the app today is going to get the best version of the app that's ever experienced, because it has the most data than it's ever had, and it's going to curate you the most like tailored information out there. And even what we're seeing currently is very compelling. And I don't know, I think since you've ran businesses and done this for a while and talked to a lot of different people in different categories, like I think it's important to have businesses that also are questions that you are curious of answering.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing. And going from a cooperative human-based model to now I'm just building tech products is, I think, can show my journey of what I think is the most valuable to give time to. But yeah, I think there's a lot of questions in Omlist, which is like, is there 2 people on this planet that have 100% similarity? Where would they be? How different are they? Are they from the same town, or are they from opposite sides of the universe? Like, how many people in their friend group are they actually most similar to? Or what is the ideal similarity to your partner? And I think there's like all of these different things that I think I'm really fascinated by, because like we are what we prioritize and spend time doing.
I love that.
And based off of that, like we can see what is the cocktail to how we blend and what our networks are made out of. Because I think there's more interconnectivity and design in this than I think anything has been able to show us until this point.
We are what we prioritize. You should tagline that. That's really cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Man, you've got a range of skills. I wish you all the best with this. This Omlist is fascinating. I just pulled it up on my browser here just to check it out. I don't mind. Again, I don't watch many movies, but it's a good resource to be able to have, and I'll certainly share it with my network. In terms of ghostwriting, you may or may not hear from me. I'm interested in exploring that a little bit further with you. I keep being told by my PR team and my marketing team that I should be writing a book. I don't really know if I want to write a book. I'm not really sure. I don't have a compulsion for it. If it's going to do something for my business or add value to the planet somehow, maybe I will. But I'd be interested in chatting with you a little bit deeper about that. You're going down the 405. You're back in America right now. I ask this question to everybody. What's your billboard say? Who are you? Who is Kyle? If you get to put one message on the 405, what does that billboard say?
Maybe we are what we prioritize.
I know. I like that one. That's a pretty good one. I'm going to use that again.
Yeah.
I'll tag you in it.
Yeah.
Are you on social media? Instagram, LinkedIn? Where do you want people to find you?
Yeah, it's my handles are Kyle F. Chords across everything.
You YouTube, said F like Frank?
Yeah, Chords. Yeah.
Kyle F. Chords. Okay, cool. All right. So if you want to follow Kyle, he's on Instagram, social media, his Kyle F. Chords. And your website is it's omlist.io. Is that what I think I saw?
That's the one. Yeah.
What's with the name Ohm? Is there some derivative behind that I'm not understanding?
Yeah, so it actually came from, but some people say, so it doesn't really like matter, but I was thinking like people say it was the first sound of the universe. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I guess sound waves wise creates a perfect circle. And I think there's like an interconnectivity to everything. And so it was just trying to find like I don't know, something like it's like a spiritually amazing list that feels like it's connecting in some way. That's my main goal.
Yeah. Transcendental.
Yeah, transcendental movie list.
I thought that's what you meant by it, but when I first said it at the outset of the call, you gave me a perplexed look, so I thought maybe I'd messed it up. So I'm like,
no,
cool.
It says I call it Omlist, but the original thing was, but it's like a kind of nom. It's delicious, so whatever comes off the tongue is easier.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. Kyle, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the Branding Laboratory and sharing some of your insights and your philosophies. I find that first conversation we had about the socialist capitalist conversation really meaningful. It's an interesting paradigm to review because there's a lot of things happening on the planet right now that are mimicking that model. And I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but it's something that is worth exploring. So anyhow, if you want to find Kyle, he is on Instagram, social media. Kyle F is in Frank Cords. His website is omlist.io. If you want to hire him for ghostwriting, he has an advanced pedigree in writing. And so if you need someone to write your book for you, apparently he and his partner, Amy, are the team to beat. So anyhow, Kyle, thank you for your time. I appreciate you, man. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining the Branding Laboratory. I have a fascinating conversation today with Kyle Cords, and we explored a range of topics from socialism to capitalism to business models to Omlist, which is his movie review, biometric movie review concept that he's created, to ghostwriting. They have a ghostwriting business, he and his partner, Amy. And I'm fascinated by all of these topics, and I try to keep him on track because he has a plethora of information and knowledge and just a bunch of really cool experiences. And we deep dived into some of his entrepreneurial journey and learning about how he's creatively built these different platforms and different businesses. And we talked about some of his core philosophies, which are very interesting to say the least. His thoughts on creativity and writing and ownership and societal structures. All of this was very thought-provoking and a little bit different from our standard laboratory podcast, but nonetheless still intriguing and scintillating. So I'm excited for you to get this episode and listen to it. It's about an hour long, so you can put it on 3-speed or 2-speed or whatever is your preference of choice and get through it. But there's a lot of nuggets that Kyle and I talked about, and just really excited to have this podcast with him. As always, our goal here on the Branding Laboratory is to offer you insights and challenge the status quo and help you think deeper and more meaningful about how business and our personal philosophies and our personal lives intersect. And if you want to continue the conversation or learn more about Kyle and his work, be sure to check him out on his platforms. And remember, this isn't just about business. It's about life, creativity, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. So thank you for tuning in. I know you have choices when you listen to podcasts. Stay curious, stay bold, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you for Kyle and for you listening in on the Branding Laboratory today. I'm excited to get this episode published in just a variety of different conversations that we had. Remember, the point of this podcast is to have deep, meaningful conversations with CEOs and entrepreneurs that are challenging the status quo and helping all of us think deeper about how business and personal philosophies and personal lives intersect, because they're all interconnected. Just running a business and is not completely separate from running your life. And how do we manage that as entrepreneurs? How do we stay ahead of the curve? How do we stay innovative? How do we stay disciplined? How do we stay focused? How do we build something that has a legacy that matters? And for me, this podcast is really the impetus for this is to interview amazing people like Kyle and some of the other guests that we've had and just hear their take on life and take on business. So if you want to continue this conversation with me, please DM me. If you want to be a guest, please DM me. If you know somebody who you think would make a fantastic guest, please DM me. And thank you for tuning in today. And I wish you guys all the best. Stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in. Stay curious, stay bold, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.